Welcome to the American Association of Biological Anthropologists webinar series, Hackademics, or Hacks for How to Succeed in Academia. I am Leslie Olesko, the Vice President and Chair of the Program Committee of AABA. It is my great honor to introduce this series. Chris Lynn and Delaney Glass developed the concept for this webinar series, inspired by a suite of papers published last year by the American Journal of Human Biology, the journal associated with the Human Biology Association. These webinars bring together authors from those papers into a conversation to bring you the highlights. Chris Lynn and Kara Ockebach are the heart and soul of the podcast, The Sausage of Science. If you haven't had a chance to listen, I highly recommend that you do. I've not only appreciated these on a personal level, but I've also used these interviews as alternative media in my teaching. Hint, hint. Delaney Glass is an associate producer of The Sausage of Science. She was lined up to lead this conversation, but as we all know these days, the best laid plans are very easily disrupted by life, this pandemic, and so many other things, which is exactly the topic of this webinar today. So perhaps it is fitting that Delaney has then been delayed and will join in about half past the hour, hopefully. Now, if I have learned nothing during this pandemic, or only one thing during this pandemic, it is the importance of teamwork and leaning on each other. Chris Lynn, the Sausage of Science co-host and professor of anthropology at the University of Alabama, and one of the panelists for today, will lead the beginning of the podcast, along with Brett Burke in support. Brett is our webinar guru and also the president of Burke Associates, which is the backbone of our association and the backbone of a few other scientific associations as well. But before I go, I want to thank the panelists for sharing their wisdom and also thank the audience for joining in with us today. And Brett, with that, thank you for telling everyone in the audience how to ask questions. The reins are yours.
Thank you very much. So this is simple. We're going to entertain questions throughout the webinar and you can type your questions in by simply going to your GoToWebinar control panel, going to the questions box and typing them in there. If you have any technical questions, you're having trouble with your video or audio or anything like that, I'll answer them. Otherwise, our panel will answer your questions and make them part of the conversation. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris.
Hey everybody, thank you for joining us today, and thank you to AABA for allowing us to participate. So Leslie basically said all the words on my script, but I'm going to say them again for the sake of having written them. My name is Chris Lynn. I am coming to you from sunny University of Alabama, where I'm a professor of anthropology. And as you heard, I'm also one of the co-hosts of the weekly Sausage of Science podcast for the Human Biology Association. Podcast co-host Kara Ockebach and I organized the Hackademic series of interviews for the podcast and then turned the series into a special supplementary issue of the American Journal of Human Biology. The first of 4 webinars, this is the first of 4 webinars, in which we feature 2 sets of authors from that issue in webinar chats. This first webinar is called Family Drama, Trauma, Teaching, and Fieldwork, or Questioning and Fieldwork, and features Adam Johnson, Rebecca Lester, who contributed an article entitled Mental Health in Academia, Hacks for Cultivating and Sustaining Wellbeing, as well as Lisa Brazelton and myself. We authored an article along with Michaela Howells and Lauren Landgraf entitled Impacts of Family and Fieldwork on Career Family Balance Among Tenure Track and Tenured Anthropologists. And if anthropologists are good at nothing else, we can make a long title. Adam Johnson, okay, everybody laugh. Okay, Adam Johnson is a doctoral student in biological anthropology at the University of Texas, San Antonio, and lecturer at the University of North Carolina, Charlotte, among other things. And Rebecca Lester is professor of anthropology at Washington University in St. Louis and a clinical social worker. Lisa Brazelton is a doctoral student in biocultural medical anthropology here with me at the University of Alabama. And as you have already heard, Brett Burke from Burke Associates will be helping moderate the first half hour, and then we'll be joined by my partner in crime here on this webinar series, Delaney Glass, who will moderate the rest. So welcome, everybody. How are you?
Good.
Doing well.
Yep.
Awesome. So we're going to start today with chatting with Rebecca and Adam, but Lisa, you and I can jump in. We have a set of prepared questions that Delaney provided us, and we're also going to be taking questions from the audience. So at any point along the way, folks can put their questions in and we'll mix them in. But let's just get started with some of the mystery surrounding who everybody is, right? So I mentioned Adam's a biological anthropologist. I should note that Rebecca is a psychological anthropologist. And so how did the two of you, as though I don't know, how did the two of you come to be co-authors of this article for the American Journal of Human Biology?
Well, as you know, it was facilitated by the great Christopher Lynn, who put us in contact with one another because we both had done work around this issue before. And so you put us in contact, and I'm very grateful for that. I think Adam and I really enjoyed the process of working on this article with Adam.
I got to say, and I'll just, before you get a chance to jump in, Adam, you know, the idea here was that we would have junior researchers and senior researchers working together so that we could have some equity in the publication process. I've tried putting people who don't know each other together to write papers before, and it's a little difficult. You guys did a great job. How was it?
It was really fun. It was hard because we're, you know, in different parts of the country and stuff, and a pandemic kind of collapsed on us as we began writing the article. But I think we made do, and we both had busy schedules, but we, I think, made time, and I think I'm very proud of the work that we put out together.
So rather than me telling your stories, I'm going to start with you, Rebecca. One of the reasons that we initially, you know, asked you to participate in this, and even before that, I invited you to be part of a special session at AAA for this same reason, which is your clinical, your ability to clinically work with your own students and folks coming back from the field and dealing with things that may be traumatic when they are doing that field work. My wife is a dance therapist and psychoanalytically trained, and they get sort of therapeutic supervision as part of their training, something we in anthropology don't. So at first I would just love to hear more about your background and what led you to start thinking about mental health and working with students, and why go out and get another degree in clinical social work?
Sure. Well, first, just to clarify that I don't work clinically with students; those are separate domains. So just to clarify that. But certainly my training in social work informs how I mentor and work with students. So yeah, I decided to get my degree in social work as an outgrowth of my research, really. And I won't go into a whole lengthy thing about it, but just to say that as a psychological anthropologist, I work on issues related to culture and mental health. And as I was continuing on with my research program, I just was feeling like anthropology is so fantastic for so many things, but it really doesn't. There are many tools that we also don't get trained in. And for the kind of work I was doing and the things that I was interested in, I felt for me, I really wanted to have more tools in my toolkit and to be able to ethically engage with some of these things that I was encountering in the field. Not that I was doing, you know, therapizing my research, you know, collaborators, but just to have that body of knowledge in terms of how to see what was going on and maybe how to respond in a more ethical way. And so that certainly has informed my work with graduate students and doing mentorship. And part of what got me interested in this topic really was working with graduate students and seeing how many of our students, not just my own students, but with, you know, in our department, were having so many difficult experiences in the field and really were not equipped to know what to do, or coming back and experiencing a lot of struggles as they were working through their trauma in a number of cases of what they had experienced. And just wanting to find some better ways of supporting those students. So that's what originally got me interested in looking at mental health within academia and as an outgrowth of some of our academic policies and procedures.
And I got to say, this couldn't be more topical, and I imagine this is true for absolutely everyone. But having just come out of a faculty retreat where one of our main issues that we were talking about was the mental health of our graduate students, I could not have been more pleased to be able to send them the article that you wrote, because it is current. It includes like dealing with COVID,
Yeah.
right? And it addresses it at so many other levels. And so we're going to jump into that in just a second. But I also want to take a minute to talk to Adam and for Adam to share his story. So one of the reasons I invited Adam, he's a great scholar, but he also had an unfortunate, unique incident in his life where a couple of years ago, he was the instructor in the UNC Charlotte classroom where a disgruntled former student, I believe, came into the classroom and shot some of his students. And so Adam is living the trauma of that kind of thing all the time, and all the students that he taught in that classroom are as well. So Adam, I just am curious how you're doing today and how you're dealing with this trauma over the past few years, and then adding COVID on top of it. Like, you're still an anthropology graduate student, so maybe you could tell us a little bit about that experience.
Sure. I mean, over the last couple of years, I'm doing well. Luckily, I have a very a good support system. My partner, who's also an academic, a sociologist, so I get support both kind of career-wise, but also just personal support. I have great mentors like Jonathan Marks, who's my master's advisor and a very close friend, and his wife, Peta Katz. My current advisor, Mike Sepek at UTSA. Just a really great support. It kind of keeps me kind of in the moment. And, you know, of course, I have days, sometimes several back to back, where I have a hard go at it. But I also, over the last couple of years, have learned that those periods of time don't last forever, and I will come out of it on the other end. And that's kind of brings in kind of a bit of hopeful light. And then my daughter has come to live with us here in Texas since the articles come out.
Awesome.
And that's awesome. That's really great. So having her here, she's 11. She's at school across the street right now. That's obviously something to keep my focus on. And then being a PhD student, about to defend my my dissertation proposal like in a couple of weeks. And then I got hired to teach at Virginia Commonwealth University. I'm still teaching at UNC Charlotte. I teach here in San Antonio at Northwest Vista College. So I'm hustling, teaching classes still because I love students. I love teaching, and I love anthropology. And I just, you know, I think it's anthropology and the community of anthropologists that have kind of rallied around me after the shooting that's really, I think, made a huge difference in recovering and getting through the kind of day-to-day ebbs and flows of dealing with the trauma as it's happened.
So I'm going to start with one of the questions that Delaney provided. So most of us know from experience that mental health is a significant problem in academia. In your article, you discuss this at length. What do you see as the biggest factors impacting mental health?
Adam, would you like to start, or do you want me to jump in?
Go for it, Rebecca. You go ahead and start.
Okay. Well, there are a number of things that we talk about in the article that are really having an effect on faculty and student mental health. And I think it's important to think about those in conjunction, because we are all together in the same system, and what happens with faculty affects students and vice versa. So the kind of three things that I see as really contributing is the neoliberalization of education. So the changes that are happening in the higher education, and the way that universities are developing through this business model, and the way that trickles down, or sometimes comes down as a sledgehammer on those of us within higher education about how our merit is evaluated, what kinds of metrics are used to determine quality, these kinds of things. So that's one component. And that, of course, is in conjunction with broader economic shifts going on in the country, that the universities are certainly in dialogue with, that are further putting pressure on faculty, grad students, contingent faculty, staff, students, everybody to work more, produce more with fewer resources, right? And the third thing that I don't know how much we talked about this in the article, but I think all of that is happening in contrast to some of the traditions in academia more broadly. The structures of academia were really created to benefit and to suit a certain subsection of the population, right? And people generally who are white, male, may have a partner at home who's taking care of everything else, not a first generation university student or professional. And so the whole history of academia is centered around this particular subset. And so that obviously doesn't work for everybody. And even for that subset, it's no longer really working. So we have this tension between changes that are happening at the university and the economic level with these long-standing traditions about this is how we do things. And that contradiction, I think, is really causing a lot of the difficulty.
So what do you see as potentially salient structural level or even individual level changes that could be made to improve mental health outcomes for faculty and students in this, we'll just say it the way it is, this hot mess or shit show?
I'll let you take that one, Adam.
Sure. I mean, one of the things I think is taking, faculty senate council seriously. Don't just have that be a kind of a box ticking thing. Putting people that have experience interfacing with students, interfacing with faculty in charge of making those decisions, and not administrators who are not trained in those things, whose interests tend to lie in a more bureaucratic realm where they are treating the university as a money-making institution.
Yeah. So individually, do you see, we are cogs in the machine, all of us here, and we're talking about hacks for improving it. So is there something that, I'll just put it out there. I'm one of those people that this structure was created for, except for the first generation part. I'm a first generation college student, so I've had to figure it out along the way. But I'm a full professor now. Rebecca's a full professor. Adam, you're a grad student. Lisa's a grad student. Are there things that we can do at our various levels to improve conditions? Can I improve conditions for my colleagues? Can Lisa improve conditions for herself and her colleagues? What do you think?
I think absolutely. I think it can feel, for me anyway, it can feel very daunting sometimes, because this is like obviously a big issue and it's very thorny. But I do think each of us contributes to the cultures that we are part of, whether it's a departmental culture or a classroom culture, how we mentor students, like that we do have a lot of say in. I mean, we're constrained by certain things, but we can change the tone of how that works, how we communicate with colleagues, what we model for other people in terms of what is kind of a healthy way of engaging with work and life and mental health. So those things, certainly, it doesn't rest all on the individual to make these changes, certainly, but those are places where I think we can make some difference.
I like some of the comments or some of the suggestions you had about like the syllabus. Can you tell us about some of those? Because those, I mean, we just started a semester. I just implemented some of those suggestions. So what can we do to be more compassionate toward the invisible students out there who don't represent that white male demographic?
Yeah, I mean that's I think one of my my most proud contributions to the article is thinking through that, because my partner and I both take pedagogy and that stuff really seriously, and I think just being really intentional about what you're asking the students to do, being able to justify why you're having them do it, so that they don't feel like the work that they're doing is busy work, so they feel like it is doing something for them to further their career, to further their education. Because it puts students off. And then thinking about decolonizing the syllabus, thinking about the ways that we grade our students, that we hold them accountable to the material. so that they're able to succeed and they're able to grow in the class without the kind of fear of punishment for taking risks and then making mistakes when they take those risks. And I really I can't emphasize Student Bloom's work enough with kind of ungrading and whatnot, and the new edited volume that came out, and then her last book, I Love Learning but Hate School.
Stay tuned for a future webinar for Susan.
Yeah,
that's next week actually. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. And it really does affect students. And I have these conversations with my students, like, what can I do to make this class work for you and to not contribute to all of the potential, mental health crises that you could have given, especially now with the pandemic. So it's like flexibility, building flexibility into the syllabus so that students can, take those moments when they need them and adjust unforeseen things that occur in their lives.
Now, in the opening of the article, you throw out some of the stats, but some of the citations on the mental health crisis in academia and grad students in particular, and it got me wondering, right? So we're framing this as there's a higher rate of reported mental health problems, and we imagine that's the tip of the iceberg if we know and understand anything about how mental health works and the stigma. What I wonder is that a representation of something that has changed, or are we just becoming more sensitive to the issues that people are dealing with?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. We don't have great data on that to be able to say definitively. I think we can all say, or most of us anyway, anecdotally and qualitatively, that the way that people are talking about this stuff has changed. I've been at WashU for 20 years, which is astounding to even think about. But the kinds of things that I'm seeing with graduate students, I did not see when I first started. So obviously that's just my experience, but I have seen with my own eyes a difference. So that leads me to suspect that there's probably something to that.
Without divulging anything personally, obviously, can you give us an example of what you've seen change?
Yeah, the number of students who are engaging in fieldwork that is extremely emotionally challenging. Some of this is the pressures of our discipline, right? To do something, even more extreme than somebody else has done, especially in sociocultural anthropology. Like, you need to make your mark, you need to go and do something that's really radical or find some really edgy thing to study. And that's all great, but that puts a young person, relatively inexperienced, into these situations that are extremely difficult. And so I'm seeing, I see a lot of students struggle in the field, sometimes unable to complete field work or have to come take a break before they go back and finish it, or when they come back, really struggling with some traumatic responses to things that they experienced or witnessed.
Yeah, and I mean, just to chime in really quick, after after the shooting happened, I had plans to do certain kinds of field work for my doctoral work, and I had to pivot because I didn't have the emotional acuity to do it. I didn't think that I could do it, so I pivoted to something that was not less difficult to do and not less rigorous, but definitely less kind of mentally, I don't know, weighty, I guess is the best way I can put it.
So this, obviously Lisa and I are going to weigh in here in a few minutes on fieldwork stuff, and we can have a nice free-flowing conversation. But I wonder how you prepare, Rebecca, how you prepare a student to go into fieldwork that is going to be so emotionally challenging.
Yeah, so I think there are a couple things. So one of the most important things is to talk about it beforehand and to recognize that there's a potential that this is going to be emotionally challenging. I mean, any fieldwork is emotionally challenging.
I was going to say, I worked with Pentecostals and I was afraid to go in because I'm an evolutionist. So.
Oh, yeah.
I was afraid I would be attacked. I was afraid, and I kept thinking, oh my God, this isn't even dangerous, and I'm afraid.
Yeah, and I mean, any field work, you're leaving your comforts of home, and there's all that stuff that goes with that. But and so regardless of the topic, I think it's really important to talk with graduate students about what to keep an eye out for that might be signs that they're struggling, ways that they can try to mitigate that before it happens, whether it's, regular conversations with their mentor or video calls home if that's possible, or whatever strategies they might do to stay in touch with people at home as best they can. Luckily, we can do that now with technology. And just to be aware of what might arise and to not be afraid to name it if it's happening. Now, that depends a lot on the mentor, right? There are a lot of graduate students who are like, there's no way in hell I could ever tell my mentor that I was struggling in the field. That is not going to happen. So if it's not your mentor, then somebody that you can reach out to if that's going on. And then when they come back from the field, having some structures in place to make sure they're not just kind of languishing alone in their apartment for a year with nobody knowing how they're doing. So those kinds of things can be really helpful.
Yeah, I was on the committee of a grad student who, after returning from the field and having experienced some stressful circumstances, really had a hard time moving forward to do analysis. And we'll have another webinar later in the series, I think towards the end, about returning from the field and some of the ennui we all feel. And that's just baseline, like any field work. But when you are processing heavy things, and there's only one person that you're even talking to, it's almost like a setup for emotional disaster or failure.
It is, and returning to those field notes that might be recounting some of those traumatic things that you've experienced. So it's like revisiting it again and again every day, and then you're supposed to write in some sort of academic way about it. It's very challenging.
Yeah. Wow. So, and I know, and I'm just going to use myself as an example. One of the things, and Lisa is one of my students, so I'll say, I try to be, when I talk to them, as sort of like, like when I was doing field work, even though it wasn't dangerous, I still had this blank emotional response, to try to give them a forum to share their feelings, right? And to then be nervous, because I can relate to what you're saying. I did not want to tell my advisor when I was nervous, when I'd made a mistake, or anything like that. Adam, can you tell us a little bit about your relationship with your advisor and how you worked through some of the trauma, if it's relevant, or if you're willing?
Sure. I mean, yeah, I have a great relationship with my advisor, Mike Cpec. He's a cultural anthropologist that works in the Amazon with indigenous people in Ecuador, the Kofan. That was my project pre-pandemic. I was going to go work with the Kofan on multi-species relation stuff, and kind of pivoted working on one of the same species, javelinas, here in Texas, which is convenient. But yeah, no, anytime I've had problems, actually just the other day, we were texting back and forth and just like, hey, I'm struggling right now. And he's like, let me know what I can do. And I'm like, I don't think I need anything from you, but I just wanted to keep you in the loop. And, he's he's always been there for me. And I shifted advisors after coming to UTSA. And of course, everybody here in the department, knew about the shooting and whatnot. And he, gladly took me on as a student, and he's been great support this whole time. And then, just because John Marks isn't my advisor anymore, it's not, he still advises me on stuff, and he has always been an ear to be there. So even like past advisors have contributed to my well-being in my doctoral studies.
So it's great to hear about our departments doing like what we're supposed to do, frankly, right? Higher up we go, the harder it is to I guess find the accountability that we are always looking for in our bureaucracies. And we know part of that is how hierarchies work. But you point out, and you said this just a few minutes ago, Rebecca, that university systems they're operating, frankly, more like investment banks, or they're operating like businesses that want to make money. And that universities are rather inequitable, despite their rhetoric to the contrary, that higher education is inherently valuable to society. So you mentioned, like, on top of this, a 13% decrease in public funding for these universities. So how does this all feed into the mental health issues that we're talking about?
Yeah, not only has there been the 13% decrease in public funding for universities, but in the 10 years from 2008 to 2018, tuition rose 37%. So we've got higher tuition, we've got lower public investment. I mean, a lot of universities are private, but that, still the same issue holds. And the kind of pressure, I mean, it's just squeezing, especially the students. And as we were talking about before, the kinds of hustling that people have to do to try to make tuition, and the number of students who are living with food insecurity or housing insecurity is just astounding. And it's how can that not contribute to mental health? It would be very difficult to sustain a sense of well-being if you don't have enough to eat, or you're not sure how secure your housing is, or how you're going to pay your tuition, or what's going to happen. So that definitely has a big impact.
Yeah, I can attest to some of the stuff that you mentioned. I thought was just my university right now, which is the long lines for mental health. Like if you set up an appointment with a counselor, how long are students waiting for these appointments?
Over a month at WashU. They're trying to improve it, but the demand is very high.
And we found out recently at the University of Alabama that unless we tell when we report to well-being that we are worried about a student, they're supposed to check in on them. If you check that they're in danger of suicide, they'll do it immediately. But if you say it's not a high priority, apparently they're sending a form letter.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That's not a check-in.
But it's not a check-in. It actually makes the students feel worse, apparently.
Yeah.
And it's because the lines are so long and they're so understaffed.
Mm-hmm.
Boy. Hey, Delaney.
Hi. Can you hear me okay?
We can. So
Great.
Delaney Glass, our producer for the Sausage of Science, has joined us, and she is going to take over moderating in just a second. But I'm not going to throw her right to the wolves because she doesn't know what question we're on. So let me finish the question that she so kindly prepared for us. So Rebecca and Adam, what hacks might you offer in light of the ever-present privatization of education that prioritizes contingent employment over profitability, over security? They favor profitability over security and well-being. Like, what can we do about this?
Adam, you want to start with that?
Yeah, I'm in the position of contingent faculty because every position I have, I have to hustle
like 5
for.
places, though.
Yeah, I'm at 3 right now, 3, 4, something, a lot. It's good for me as a graduate student to have the opportunity to be able to do those things. I was still even at UNC Charlotte when I was still in North Carolina. I was a lecturer but contingent every year. And that was a little bit more security, but now going semester to semester, it's hard and that's stressful. And my hack is build good relationships with the people that I work with, and do a really good job and serve my students well, so that when they do have classes to offer, I'm going to be the one they come to because I'm reliable. I do what the department needs me to do.
So let me push back a little bit on that, Adam, because I just had a conversation with a grad student in my department yesterday. We were talking about conferences, and I was encouraging, I encourage students to go to conferences to build their professional and social networks for this very reason. And the pushback I heard was they are elitist groups and popularity contests, and breaking into those isn't worth the expense of going to these overpriced conferences. Well, how do we work around stuff like that?
I mean, I use the conferences. I use the conferences, but also John Marks would introduce me to everybody, so I had the benefit of
that's the answer, right?
A very gregarious advisor.
I would just say, yes, the conferences are overpriced, and yes, they're elitist and popularity contests. I think that is all true. And at the same time, what I would disagree with is I don't think it's impossible to break into that. I've had over the years so many people email me out of the blue, I don't know them, who are either grad students or lecturers or junior faculty, whoever, said, I would love to meet with you at the conference. And absolutely, sure. I've made great colleagues that way. And, I'm happy to network people. I have to know about you or else I can't do that. So whether or not you have to physically go to a conference is another question. But I think that they look hermetically sealed, those networks, but they're not. And I think there are ways to make inroads.
And I'll just answer my own question by saying really quickly how I know you all, because I have made a concerted effort to get to know people. So Rebecca, I know your work from when I was studying dissociation as a grad student, and have just been taking it. I looked for opportunities to meet you. Adam, years ago, actually reached out to me when he was shopping for grad schools because of some of the research that I've done. Lisa came up to me at the grad fair at a conference. That's how I met her. Delaney was at the AAAS, and I was out there to give a talk. And I think we talked to each other online or had some familiarity, but we had a chance to meet. So yeah, I'm with you. Like it takes a little bit of effort, and I have also gone to conferences where I didn't know anybody and I left still not knowing anybody. So sometimes it just takes trying a few times. But I like that advice a lot. Delaney, I want to hand the moderating off to you if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Yeah, so it's really interesting that you mentioned making connections, and I definitely relate to that. I mean, I think I kind of, throughout my whole life, I've always enjoyed making connections with people, and, I don't like the word networking, but I like the word connecting more than that. I know that for some people it's harder, and, sometimes people can be really shy. And on top of that, I think especially at the graduate level, when things feel really uncertain and nebulous, it can feel really siloed, right? Academia can feel really siloed compared to other jobs in industry or government, things of that nature. So I'm kind of curious, like, especially on the topic of mental health and just more broadly the shared struggles that we all have. I would like to know kind of, how does this siloing factor into that? Do you think that viewing the struggles of, say, tenure track faculty as distinct from contingent faculty, as distinct from graduate students, as distinct from undergraduate students, as distinct from just the staff and the people that make universities run, do you think that that ultimately harms efforts to make conditions better for everybody? I'm kind of curious what you all think of that.
I mean, I think it's important to recognize that there are differences and different needs and priorities in those different groups, so we don't want to lose track of that. But I think it's also really critical to understand that we are all part of the same community and the same system, and what affects my students affects the staff, affects me, affects everybody. So it's a little bit of a balance, I think, because we don't want to homogenize everybody, because there are distinct needs and issues that need to be addressed at those different communities. But I think we do need to collectively think about what are these structures doing to us as humans and in our relationships as we go forward. Adam, do you have any thoughts about that piece?
Yeah, I mean, I think just like exactly what you said. I mean, I think being somebody that's contingent faculty and working alongside people that are tenured or on tenure track, I know that I struggle with things that they don't have to deal with, the insecurity of if I'm going to be able to feed my kid and stuff semester to semester is something that somebody that is tenure track doesn't really have to stress about as much. And but at the same time, I also understand that my position is a consequence of this neoliberalization of the university, where they want to, pay somebody to teach classes less money than they would have to pay a tenure track faculty member. As people retire and their lines just disappear, and then they hire, one or two, adjuncts to teach those classes in the meantime, but they can't mentor students, and so they're losing out on so much by doing it. Yes, I appreciate the paycheck, but I also understand kind of the structural issues at the university level that arises out of that.
Yeah, definitely. And when you mentioned neoliberalism, I just kind of thought back to in the paper where you all talk about how there's been a 13% decrease in public funding for universities as of late, and I think that that's quite impactful. And I'm kind of curious. This might be a controversial question, but I think about this almost constantly, which is, if there's this sort of degrading public funding for universities and increasing privatization, at the same time, there's this rhetoric, right, that people have to get an undergraduate degree. They have to be college educated to move up, to have social mobility, to equalize. But I can just say, excuse me, from my own experience, right? Like my partner, for years, he did his degree and he's left with nothing but debt. And a lot of people are in that situation where they're left with nothing but crippling student debt. And so I often think about this in my role as a graduate student and, aspiring to continue to be a researcher and a teacher, like how to kind of balance that line of, do we keep pushing that rhetoric and that idea that you have to be college educated in this society in light of the debt and sort of the financial burden that it poses, because that has a tremendous impact on mental health, but also people's material reality. So I'm kind of curious what you think about that as people who are in these institutions.
Adam, do you want to start? Or I
Yeah,
can.
I can. It doesn't make a difference. I was actually thinking, funny enough, you asked that question. I was actually thinking about it the other day. I was reading the news, and they were, in the light of, the pandemic and kind of global shipments slowing down, and so things aren't getting around the world. They're like, oh, we should revitalize, American production. And part of the reason that debt exists in the way that it does is because jobs that did not require university education have been shipped overseas. And so we've talked about structural issues that happen kind of at the institutional level, but if we think more broadly, like these very important jobs that are well paying in manufacturing and production that have been shipped overseas, now they want to bring them back, but of course those jobs have gone away. And then the what's kind of filled that gap is, oh, well, you need a university education, because most of the jobs that do pay well, that create kind of a more equitable future, require a four-year education of some sort or another. And you see these kind of broad historical consequences of really, I think, problematic economic decision making that's happened over the last century or so.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think, yeah, it's an incredibly important consideration, the kind of debt that people are living with if they pursue a four-year degree and they don't have other resources that they can bring to bear. I do think, from what I understand, unfortunately, it is still the case that having a college degree over time means that you will generally be able to earn more money. That will displace that debt, but that's a long-term view that doesn't necessarily help the person who's 2 years out of college and is trying to repay debt and figure out how they're going to get their career started. And there's lots of things that could shift around that to make it more possible for people to sustain that transition. But overall, if you look over the course of somebody's lifetime, assuming that they live a long life, it does make sense financially if you're looking at it from that perspective. But again, if you're looking at the pragmatics, it is a really difficult place to be in.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, a lot of this is really heavy, and I don't want to, be too pessimistic about all of it. So I'd love to, before we kind of switch over to thinking about family and fieldwork, I'd love to have you tell our audience some of the hacks to deal with mental health, and kind of ending on a more positive note of, what has worked well for you in your own life, and maybe what's worked well for your students in light of all these complicated considerations.
Sure, I can talk about, there's 4 things that really help me. So this is coming from my personal experience and work with students that have been the most helpful. So some of them it's challenging, because the first one is balance, which is a super easy thing to say, right? We all say we want to have balance and we want work-life balance and all that kind of stuff, and that's great to say. actually developing that and dealing with the internal struggle that might come along with that, for me, that has been very difficult, because part of the reason, or part of the way that we become successful in academia, is that we don't have balance. We work a lot and we, put other things at a lower priority. And so reinstituting balance can, for me anyway, brought a lot of anxiety, honestly. But I made that a priority over the past, 6 or 7 years, and that's helped me enormously. So what does that mean? That means setting and holding boundaries around work. Academia, work can go all day, every day, 365 days a year, and we still wouldn't get everything done. I mean, that's just the nature of what it is. So we have to make our own boundaries, and we have to stick to them. If we don't stick to them, they don't count. And it's been challenging for me. It is not easy, and I'm not always successful at it. But I really have been working at setting boundaries about, when am I sending emails? When am I responding to emails? When am I expecting a response? How late am I working in the evenings? When do I just put it away when it's not done and say, this is fine for today, I will pick it up again tomorrow? It's hard, but it has made a huge difference for me, as has taking some breaks, which is also very hard for me to do, because that means leaving stuff undone. And there's like a week that I could be making progress on this article, or I could be reading this stuff for class or whatever, but just really enforcing that for myself. On top of that, one thing that's been really very helpful for me is, I won't use the word network because you make a really good point about that word, but the connections that I've made with other people. So other people in my department, other people in other departments, other universities, and most importantly, people who are not in academia. That has been a very important kind of reality check for me about what is kind of a reasonable orientation to one's job. I have found that very helpful, and a way to get out of that headspace and live in a different world, where my value is not measured by my, publications and things like that. That's been very helpful for me.
Yeah, I really relate to that. I was just thinking about this the other day, how like all these things that we stress about in our jobs in academia, right? Like they're so important and they hold so much currency in our work. And then when you talk to like your mom or like, a friend, they're like, I don't care. I don't care about this at all. So it's refreshing to be, putting that in perspective. And like you said, thinking about what does it mean to actually just view this as a job.
Yeah. Adam, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I mean, apart from, I think one of the great violences of academia is the fact that you to go where the job is. So you're always going to be uprooted. I don't know anybody that like lives where they grew up and like can go hang out with their parents or their siblings or whatever. That's nobody. And so finding ways to make those connections with people not in academia. Of course, you want good relations with your colleagues and stuff too, but I think that makes a huge difference. And the boundaries, that's like, I try to live and breathe the boundaries, because like I know that the, struggle set in when I let those boundaries kind of break down. And then in terms of, serving the students and stuff really helps, like constantly working through like, how am I designing my syllabus? What am I doing this semester to make their lives, maybe not necessarily better, but definitely not worse, hopefully better, but definitely not worse. Like, how do I design my syllabus? What am I asking them to do? When am I asking them to do it? How am I assessing them? All of those things, knowing that I get feedback from my student, like, thank you so much for being flexible in this assignment. Like, my mom was sick and I could not focus and I wanted to take care of her. Thank you for giving me an extension on this assignment, or thank you for letting me kind of get caught up on stuff. And, it doesn't really cost me anything, but it can mean, the difference between somebody's success and complete failure at the university. And so getting that feedback from students, I think really does kind of ground me at moments too. So there is something in the job itself, and it is a job, but in the job itself that I use to get me through the day.
Thanks for that. Yeah, and as a student, I can say that I think I can speak for a lot of students to say that that flexibility is tremendous, and a lot of times it can be life-changing and can really make a difference, especially in terms of feeling supported. So thanks for that. Any final thoughts before we kind of transition over to thinking about fieldwork?
I don't think so.
Do we want to ask the question that came from the audience?
Oh, I didn't see that one.
Yeah, I don't want to neglect that. So we have a question. I will read the question out. My stepfather was the superintendent of a school district that experienced a shooting at his high school in 2012. And despite their unusual level of preparedness, I witnessed the trauma that he and the community experienced due to the tragedy. The current pandemic has only underscored the need to be prepared for inevitable disasters that we all continue to experience. So with this in mind, how can we better prepare graduate students for fieldwork in these uncertain and challenging times? And I think this question also kind of extends to even just beyond fieldwork, like just natural disasters, things that come up in our lives. Like for example, the property that I'm renting just experienced a landslide, and like, you know, having to move quickly, like it's very stressful. So yeah, do you guys have any thoughts on that? And we can kind of open it up to everybody here too, because it does kind of cross this line of mental health and fieldwork.
Mm-hmm.
I think, you know, one of the biggest things, as we kind of talked about a little bit before, is making it part of the conversation that life can be very traumatic and things can happen. Now, with that said, there's no way I don't think you can fully prepare for something like what Adam went through. You know, you can prepare all day, but it's not going to avert the trauma that arises from something like that. But if it's part of the conversation and there's good communication and there's awareness of there have to be resources, and then awareness of how to access those resources is really the most important piece, I think. It's when people are afraid to talk about it or don't even recognize that it's happening to them, or they feel like there's nowhere to go with it. I think that's when things get really compounded and more difficult.
Yeah, and in terms, I mean, I would just speak directly to the kind of preparations for kind of active shooter stuff because I've been on the inside of it. And I think institutions can prepare for the institutional blowback that occurs from it. And, you know, I'm at UTSA, I'm in Texas, everybody has a gun. I just assume that, and just being in Texas itself is its own trauma for me, which sucks. But we have to go through active shooter training and to, you know, at UTSA, and they have, you know, training you have to go through that students can carry, you know, guns onto campus, and that's perfectly fine as long as they follow certain rules with it. And so the institution's praying, but when you're in a classroom and it happens, you could have had 1,000 hours of active shooter training, and it doesn't make a difference because you're not going to be like, okay, well, let me do step 1, 2, 3, and 4. Like you just are trying not to get shot, and you're trying to make sure other people are also not going to get shot. And so, you know, preparation, like maybe at the institutional level is good, especially for dealing with the consequences of something happening, but really kind of in these moments when they're happening, not so much. And then I think the frustrating thing in terms of preparedness is being proactive and not reactive. And yet we see hundreds of mass shootings and sometimes in some years, you know, close to a dozen school shootings in a year, and nothing state or federal levels has been done whatsoever. It's incredibly frustrating. It's incredibly disheartening. And every time it comes up in the news, it's not only traumatic to have to kind of relive that moment, it's also traumatic to know that nothing's going to happen and more people are dying. And like people only, I mean, I wrote on my blog, but those school shootings only stay in the news for like 3 to 6 days in the cycle, and then they disappear and then people forget about it. Like, and that's how it's been with the UNCC shooting. Every year it comes back up. It's only been a couple of years, but UNCC has their thing and then everybody moves on from it. And there's just kind of the people that experience it are kind of left there. And so there's things like that that you also can't prepare for. Yeah.
I just want to thank you, Adam, for talking about it, because as you point out, they do leave the news cycle quickly. And one of the reasons I reached out to you, and I'm glad you've been willing to talk about it, is because I was afraid that would happen to that incident. And it's one that, as a fellow anthropologist, we can put a pin in and continue to use as a, I don't know, if something good can come out of it, let's do that. So thank you for continuing to be willing to speak about it. And And thank you too, Rebecca. Like the model that you're setting is one that I'm trying to implement here and follow myself. So that's why we've invited you on here today.
And if I could say anything just from a student perspective, so Christopher Lynn, you have done a great job, and the University of Alabama has done a great job. So just from a personal perspective of, you know, I think part of the key is definitely a huge part of it is having these conversations, but then also that communication component, but then also the built-in flexibility component is super key. So I mean, because, you know, just from my perspective and my background, so I came in to University of Alabama and started my PhD immediately upon finishing my master's. So no breaks in between or anything. Graduated with my master's in August of 2019, started my PhD program in fall of 2019. And then life happened, and I ended up taking spring semester of 2020. Was it 20? No, yeah, 2021 off. So took spring semester of 2021 off, and you know, with full support, and that was huge to be able to take that much needed break for a number of personal reasons. So, but just having some of that flexibility, and also that communication, that line of communication is just key. So because we're all human, so life does happen. So, and that's super important.
Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, I'd love to dig more into the paper that you all wrote about family in the field. So you all basically did a study with tenured and non-tenured anthropologists to understand the impacts of family and field work on career and family life balance. And yeah, I'd love if you could give a brief synopsis of, you know, maybe some key findings and what inspired you to write that paper.
Do you want me to start, Chris?
Yeah, please.
Okay, so well, I came in, again, started UA fall of 2019. So for my PhD, I was on the heels of finishing my master's, so which I started in 2017, kind of went straight through. It was interesting because that was my second go around with grad school. So my first had taken place in the 1990s, the mid 1990s. I was almost through with my first graduate program, and I left on maternity leave to start a family. So, and by doing so, I did not have the support whatsoever of my department. So in the mid 1990s, I was basically told I was shooting my career in the foot, which was kind of what happened. So so I didn't have support from my advisor or my department at the time. So to start a family and complete my school, there was no flexibility built in there. That was a big issue. And then I didn't have support on the home front from my partner for us to start the family and complete academia. So basically I just stepped back and took a long maternity leave. So, and the big joke when I returned to grad school in 2017 was that I was coming off of 21 years of maternity leave. So to finish my education. And so that's where I started. Things went well with the master's program, and I started the PhD. And coming in, so Chris and I had many conversations about this and work-life balance and families and how it impacts graduate studies and tenure tracks and career tracks. And he was like, we did this amazing study, because the study involved the survey. I wasn't initially involved on the survey. That was done prior to me coming on board to UA, and it included a lot more than just tenure and tenure track anthropologists. It also included graduate students and a host of other folks. But it was on family in the field information, and so I wanted to look at that survey further and do something with it. So there had already been a big paper that had come out on it, but I was specifically interested in the field part, so the field study. So one of the things that in becoming a mom, and a parent, so that I struggled with. Even through those 21 years of being on maternity leave, I stayed connected with the field, and I would do field work, often on a voluntary basis. So, but with my kids in tow, I was like, they can't use me as a volunteer if I don't have my kids in tow. So that's kind of how I balance that. And I wanted to look at the stats. So what did they find? Who were other people doing this? How were they doing this? How were people feeling about this? Had it changed over the years? So where was I going to stand at that point? And returning to graduate school and then trying to get into a career or get into the workforce in anthropology. So how did things look today compared to how they looked 20 years ago? That's kind of what led to the beginning of it. So
yeah, and I similarly, my situation was a lot like Adam's. Actually, I was in grad school and I had triplet kids. They were one when I started grad school. So I was flying by the seat of my pants through the whole affair. My wife was a stay-at-home mom for that first period. So basically, she stayed home and took care of the kids while I drove an hour and 40 minutes each way every day from Poughkeepsie to Albany, New York to go to grad school. And I would get up at 5 a.m. and drive up there before the kids woke up so I could escape, right? Because once they start crying, I got to grab one and stick a bottle in their mouth. So I would get up, and I'm going to tell I love telling stories. So I'll tell you a really short story. So I would get up at 5 a.m. and I was so tired, I would lay down in the bathtub and just take a shower that way and let the water run over me. That way I wouldn't fall back into deep sleep. And then I would drive to Albany, and I'd stopped at the same rest stop to get coffee so often they started giving me the trucker discount, which told me I can't give up on that discount, so I need to keep caffeinating every day. But I would get up there so early that blizzards would happen, and they would cancel school, but I was already on the road, So I'm handling this. I went through 3 cars and triplets, and I'm asking my professors, like, how do I handle going to the field when I have toddlers at home? My wife can't be left with 3 babies. And basically all their answers were, I don't know. So I did my field work locally, but one of the questions I had coming out of this was, I'm a privileged white guy, right? I made this happen by being lucky, and frankly, I would tell people in my statement of purpose, I straight up said that I had triplets, and they still admitted me to the grad program. Now, the reason I say that is because every single woman I've talked to since then have all been like, are you nuts? I would have never put that on a grad application. The only reason you got in is because you're a white dude. And in fact, one of the people who let me in said, we thought that you were crazy, but we wanted to see if you could do it. I mean, no offense to them, but I don't really think that was probably very ethical. I did okay. But what it left me wondering is about all of the people without my resources who also have kids, who would be great anthropologists or whatever, who aren't given a chance or don't even try. And so we started this study to sort of explore that. And the first outcome was one that Rebecca mentioned, which is that we're all probably the children of someone else who went to college. Now, I'm not. My parents didn't finish. But most anthropologists and anthropology grad students, I think the stat was 80 or 90%, come from a family where at least one of their parents has higher education, right? And I know from my own family that without them saying, money doesn't matter, do something you love, that I wouldn't have kept going. Because my kids are 18 now. My wife has autoimmune disease and works part-time. We don't make a whole lot of money. I filed for bankruptcy in my first year here, right? I left the house in New York, but still I'm doing it. And I'm wondering about, if we are about studying diversity, then we need all of the diversity that we supposedly study, or we're never going to see everything. It's impossible for us to completely relate to our interlocutors when we're in the field. but the closer that we get to resembling the diversity in the world as scholars, the closer we're going to get to having an actual understanding of their experience when they explain it to us, and be better prepared to then share it with the world and make better use of it instead of just setting up totemic, exotic others.
Yeah, so it was interesting, Delaney. We went through the survey, which was, there were over 1,000 participants. So, but we narrowed it down to 297 who had who were in anthropology and were either on a tenure or who were already tenured or on a tenure track, that had children, had the field experience, and had feedback to share. So through the survey questions. And so it was that's where this paper kind of stems from, was narrowing that larger survey down that is full of some really rich information. So to those 297 participants, and really focus in on impacts of family in the field and that perceived stress and balance. So working toward trying to find that balance, which is really socially, culturally constructed. So what is balance? So we're you know, so that's a whole nother question unto itself. So, but
Rebecca took a hit on that earlier. I think you said it nicely, right? It's basically all bullshit. We make it up.
Right.
How's your balance going, Lisa?
Well, I'm sorry, what?
How is your balance going?
So what is that?
Yeah, right.
So no, it's going much better. Thank you very much. So it is going much better.
Yeah, I'd love to kind of linger a little bit on kind of two themes that came up when you all were talking. So one, balance, and then the other one is positionality. And this relates to a question we have in the chat, and I'm going to paraphrase it, but balance kind of appears to be just a privileged thing. Like, you know, if you're tenured, it's easier. If you have some security, it's easier. If you, you know, don't have to work multiple jobs, it's easier. And yeah, I'd love to talk more about how do we support students and colleagues who are not in that position. I know, you know, from my own experience, balance, work-life integration, whatever you want to call it, often just feels like a pipe dream because, you know, I do have to work a job in addition to my PhD research and a whole other host of things. And so, and I know a lot of students are in even more dire straits in that respect. So how do we reconcile that? And then secondly, just to kind of push back on a point that was made earlier, what does this all mean when the overall environment isn't changing? So it's like we need a more diverse academia. We need, you know, all different perspectives and life experiences, et cetera. And that sounds really nice, but it's also like, what environment are we bringing people into? Not we, but whoever's doing the hiring, like, you know, they're hiring people on, and are we bringing people into a toxic environment? And how do we reconcile that in terms of thinking about work-life integration? So I don't know, there's a lot there.
Okay, so I'll jump in on the last part just because I recently had an interaction with some people associated with folks in the NFL, right? So we're a football school, so we know football players, and I can say that academia isn't alone, right? Any hierarchy, any bureaucracy with a hierarchy is set up is by default has inequity, and so I don't necessarily think academia is toxic in a way. I don't think it's any more toxic than many other bureaucracies. My mother works for the Social Security Administration, so I've grown up with an appreciation of what I'll just say are Gramscian inefficient bureaucracies, right? Antonio Gramsci famously talked about how these bureaucracies are perpetuated by the middling bureaucrats who don't do what is not in their job description. And so much of a bureaucracy is in nobody's job description. So many needs don't get met because there is nobody assigned to the role of meeting them. And so I don't necessarily think that the university is an inherently toxic environment that we should be steering people away from. But one of the things that we can think about is, how do we increase that? Your point is well taken, though. Like, if we're going to increase the diversity to have more balance, we can't start at the university. We have to start when people are born and start being socialized about their opportunities in life. And, you know, just to toot our own horn a little bit, even though COVID has maybe killed this program, we had a program called Anthros Elemental, where we're going out and teaching anthropology in the local elementary schools as our personal effort to try to start addressing that. And I can say my kids are of age now. They're the first age cohort of students who had anthropology when they were in 3rd and 4th grade. And all I can say about that is I wish they'd gotten a little bit more in middle school and then also in high school, right? Because there's a long gap between 3rd and 4th grade and undergrad. They've forgotten a few things, but you know, there is a model there, right? So these kids, what we've learned is 3rd and 4th graders are sophisticated enough to learn things like race as a social construction with biological implications. They completely and intuitively get that right out of the gate. I forget your other question.
Okay, I forgot it too. I asked too many questions at once.
You were paraphrasing. Maybe Lisa remembers.
Too much.
Well, one of the answers that I was thinking of when you were asking your questions, and I don't exactly remember how you worded them, but because you were talking about the toxic environment or how do we overcome some of these things, and Rebecca may be able to attest to this as well, being at where she's been for 20 years, but returning to graduate school, things are a lot different now than they were 20 years ago. And I want to say that I do believe that they are a lot less toxic than in the past. So we have, and when I say we, I think we as a society, we as a culture, and academia in general has evolved in such a way. And I'm coming from, you know, multiple schools. So because I got my master's in one place and now working on my PhD, and then also doing that, connecting with other people. So, and having a lot of these conversations and how things have changed over the years. I do believe there's a lot more resources and there's a lot more awareness, and people aren't afraid to come and begin these conversations. So in the past, there was a lot of, you're a student, don't ask questions, don't have these conversations, just this is how it's structured, this is how it is, this is what you do to get through, get by. And I don't see that as much whatsoever now. So we're invited in. Look, we're here. We're all on a webinar together. So we're part of a joint conversation, and which I think is a wonderful thing. So.
Yeah, absolutely. This same time last year, the other co-producer on the Sausage of Science and I, Alex McClue, we hosted a panel conversation about COVID-19 and how it's affecting research, and we touched on, you know, fieldwork, and all of us in that episode were kind of at different stages in the graduate path, and you know, one of the things that came up was how to pivot and how to continue doing research during COVID-19, and I'd love to use that as sort of a pivot in this conversation about fieldwork. So the question that keeps coming up for me, and really was salient while reading this paper, was, is fieldwork necessary? As anthropologists, there's a lot of pressure to do fieldwork. And I can say from my own experience, I'm pivoting towards a project or a couple projects that are not fieldwork based. And it could be my own insecurity, but I often feel like, am I a real anthropologist? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know, to me, it matters more to be a well-rounded researcher, but I want to know from all of you, do you think field work's necessary to be an anthropologist and to be a good one? And how do we think about field work in light of the ongoing pandemic that's not going to end anytime soon?
So I can jump in on this first if you want, Lisa. Yeah, I like your original formulation of the question was, do you have to do field work to be a great anthropologist, which I like even better, because I think what we're wrestling with is the fetishization of field work that began with Malinowski. And if you look at the history of the discipline, once upon a time, there were tons of people who got their PhD by doing archival or library research. And there were tons of people, Boaz sent lots of people out to do salvage ethnography with the idea that there would be more data to be analyzed by future researchers than could be analyzed by the contemporary ones. So there's supposed to be all these data collected that other people were supposed to research. But as we all probably know, all of us go out, collect a bunch of research, think we're going to have a bunch of students come in and help us with that over the next 20 years. And those students all have bought into the fetish of doing field work and collecting their own data. And so the data languish, everybody goes out and collects new data, and we have this problem. So no, I don't think we need field work, but I do think that we all come up in the discipline with the goal of wanting to do field work. And so that's one part of it, right? So do we need to do field work to be good or great or even good anthropologists? No. But we may have grown up on a model of anthropology where field work was one of the things that we most wanted to do. So even though I did my dissertation locally because I had toddlers, the minute I got my job, I got out of country because I resemble your remark. I feel more legitimate because I've done field work abroad, and the quality is no better. It's just my own thing, right? The second piece of that, which is probably more important, is if you don't do field work, will you get a job? Right? So I don't know yet, but I would say it should be yes, right? It should be yes. And so I'm in the position as someone who has been a search committee chair and on search committees to put my money where my mouth is. Will I look at someone whose field work has been in the US the same way I will look at someone who's done work outside the US? And I can tell you that I have looked at both cases, and we've considered and hired people whose primary work has been right in their own communities. And I have a graduate student who, this will be my last comment on this question so I can give other people a chance, but we have a grad student who I admit I was pushing to do field work because of the model that I grew up on and my worry that this person wouldn't be employable. This student convinced me and the rest of the committee that online field work not only made more sense during a pandemic, but made more sense for the topic. I was totally convinced. And I will say with pride that as of yesterday, that student just got a third fellowship from our university to ensure that they're able to finish, which says the university is also putting their money and investing in that type of thing. So that's important. So that'll make that person more employable when they see the fieldwork along with all those financial support from the institution. So that's important. Seeing how everybody responds to fieldwork, regardless of where it is critical.
And one of the other things we've talked about is just over the years, how do we define the field? So what is the field? Is it somewhere exotic, far away in a foreign land, or can it be legitimately in our own backyard? Can it be conducted, field work that you conduct online? So we're anthropologists. We're studying humans, human populations, and we're humans. So so I think that flexibility in how the field is defined and where that field work takes place is key to this as well. So if you're a good researcher, you can conduct that research without going to a faraway exotic place that's going to put you in debt or any other, problems. So.
I'll just add to that at WashU, we have a number of students who do research in the United States. It's something that has kind of emerged as a focus. I mean, not intentionally, and I will say 2 of my former students who worked in the US, one now has tenure at CUNY, and the other is doing a postdoc at Princeton and has a job coming up at Yale. So it is possible to have a successful, however you want to define that, career in academia without going far away. They both did things right in the States.
Thanks for that. We have a question just come in, so let me open that up. Okay, so thank you all for this webinar. Let's see. Does the panel have any advice on trying to keep your eye on the prize on the full GS graduate school, I'm assuming, application process when coming up from a hard knocks class of anthro or archaeology professionals and experiences? The only thing keeping you up at night are old undergrad grades. When the only thing keeping you up at night are old undergrad grades.
Can you read that again?
Yeah, so basically, how to keep your eyes on the prize of graduate school applications when you've struggled in undergrad and or had some bad grades in undergrad.
Oh, that was me. I flunked out as an undergrad. How do you keep your eyes on the prize? So if I understand the question right, one of the things running the podcast that we ask every single time, which is every week, is what's your origin story? What got you into anthropology? And almost without exception, anyone who didn't just go straight through school says, I have maybe a unique story, and then they tell you about their jobs and their adventures and all these things that they went through before finding anthropology, and that tends to be actually the norm, right? And I think it makes, like, we're studying human behavior, so if you just go straight up through school, your experience of human behavior might be more limited. Like I kind of, this is one of those things that I think also may have driven me to want to do this paper. Is I kind of think that people who have had those experiences are better prepared for empathizing with others who have similar experiences, which means if everybody goes straight through school to grad school to professor, then the people they are most likely to empathize with are other people just like that. So having people who've taken all sorts of different paths in life is really, really important to balance in our discipline, if there can be such a thing, if I'm understanding the question correctly.
Yeah, and I mean, along those lines too, having those experiences can also help you to be a better teacher, a better mentor, a better colleague. And we have another question along those lines about, kind of pushing back, because we've been focusing a lot on how does doing or not doing field work impact you as a researcher, but what about being a teacher? Because the person in the chat asking this question rightfully points out that Susan Bloom stresses that anthropologists should also focus on how to teach. So I'm curious, how to kind of bring that into this conversation. What does fieldwork bring to teaching, or not doing fieldwork bring to teaching?
Lisa, you want to talk about that?
What does fieldwork bring to teaching, or teaching bring to fieldwork? Well,
not doing fieldwork. How does the doing versus not doing impact your ability to teach? I don't know how many opportunities you've had to teach. I've had a few.
Yeah, I've had a few, especially when I was working on my master's, so in the classroom. And then I come from a from being a mom, so from a administrator position, so with homeschooling kids, so and high school students and preparing them for college and how to do things. So, but I really feel like the best teaching tools are those life stories. So just in having the experiences and then knowing how to present those in such a way that gets other people interested in having those conversations and makes them feel comfortable opening up. So, and so being part of chat groups and conversations, so really help people become better teachers. So no one wants to stand up and listen to somebody else just tell them everything that they need to know. So that's not going to get anybody interested in learning or interested in the subject. So people just have to be part of it. So designing, or first off, becoming part of those conversations yourself. So, and then if you're designing something, so design it so that people work together. So they're going to be part of it. So
I kind of think, and I agree with you 100%, Lisa. Like we tell stories and we resonate with our students however we can. I don't know that being a good field worker makes you an inherently good teacher. I think being able to figure out where students are mentally, emotionally, psychologically, maturity-wise, and then finding things that resonate with them is the best way. And sometimes, if your students are undergrads and they're 18 or 19 or 20, you talking about your field work all the time may sound just pretentious to them, and they can't relate to it. I find that, and my former desire to talk more about field work has been replaced by an awareness that, well, I'll just say my kids are now their age, so I get it. I understand. I now have a very personal recognition of what's in their minds, and they're less impressed that I've been to places they haven't heard of than I would think. When I talk about my kids in the developmental process or my dogs, I may get as much resonant, like a much of the material reflected back at me and more interest than if I'm talking to them about Samoa or Madagascar or Costa Rica or anywhere I've been. And I think if you're really good at picking up on stories that will make a point, I'm not going to say I steal lots of stories, but I may steal lots of stories that other people have told me, including my own mentors, Lisa, Delaney, Rebecca, Adam. I will fully steal all your stories. I will credit you. So I will borrow your stories and use them to make contact if I don't have my own. And I think anybody who's good at reading can find material to bring into the classroom or watching television or listening to a podcast. There's so much material out there if you're paying attention.
Yeah, for sure. And on that note, I want to be respectful of people's time. We are going to have our next webinar next Friday at 2 p.m. New York, 11 a.m. San Francisco, 20 hours Madrid, on mentoring and unteaching in anthropology, if you want to hear more about this topic at length. But I also want to thank all of our panelists today. Thank you, Adam, Lisa, Rebecca, and Chris. Thanks so much for coming and having this conversation. I feel like we could literally talk like the rest of the day about all of these topics. So thank you for coming. And, you know, if you have any things you want to plug or any last minute, you know, sentiments you want to share with our audience, please feel free. But I just want to, you know, close out to be a little bit mindful of everybody's time.
Thank you.
Also, Rebecca has a book, Adam has a blog, and I have a podcast or two. How's that? Thank you all. Man, I can't believe we're out of time already.
Yeah.
And thanks to everybody out there who joined us today. And great questions. I'll see you next week.
All right. Bye.
Bye, everyone.